My name is Diamond, and I just turned 30 years old. What should have been a milestone celebration turned into the most painful betrayal of my life. I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw it, my entire family smiling on a Tahitian beach with the caption, "A wonderful day for a wonderful family." My fingers trembled as I typed. "Why?" Dad replied instantly, "We didn't want to waste our time on a clown." The pain was unbearable, but I smiled and replied, "Surprise waiting for you." Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most. Growing up as the oldest of 3 children, I always felt the weight of expectations crushing my shoulders. My father, Gerald, a successful business owner, with piercing blue eyes that could freeze you with disapproval, never seemed satisfied with anything I accomplished. "Diamond, you need to set an example," he would say, whenever my younger siblings Amber and Ryan were around. But somehow setting an example turned into being the family experiment, the one they tested all their parenting theories on before perfecting them for my siblings. Our house in suburban Connecticut was beautiful. From the outside, 4 bedrooms, manicured lawn, and a 3-car garage filled with luxury vehicles. But inside those walls I learned early that love was conditional, and I somehow never met the conditions. Mom Elizabeth was physically present, but emotionally absent. She nodded along with whatever Dad said, her perfectly manicured nails tapping nervously on any nearby surface whenever tension rose. "Why can't you be more like the Thompson boy next door?" Dad would ask after I brought home an A-. He got into Princeton, early decision. The comparisons were endless. My piano playing wasn't as good as my cousin Alice's. My athletic abilities paled next to Ryan's natural talent. My social skills weren't as refined as Amber's. I still remember the summer when I was 10 years old. The family had planned a trip to the community pool, a rare treat since Dad usually worked weekends. I had been looking forward to it all week, even practicing my swimming in the bathtub. But that morning, I hadn't finished my math worksheet. "Everyone else is ready to go," Dad said, jingling his car keys. "We're not waiting for you to finish your responsibilities." I rushed through the problems, making careless errors in my hurry. "Done," I announced, running to the door with my swim trunks and towel. Dad glanced at my paper. "These are wrong. Fix them, and maybe next time you'll learn to do your work properly the first time." The car pulled away with Ryan and Amber waving from the back window. I spent that afternoon alone, redoing math problems while listening to the distant sounds of neighborhood kids splashing and laughing. By the time I finished, everyone had returned sunburned and full of stories about their wonderful day. That pattern continued throughout my childhood. When I had my biggest piano recital in high school, a piece I had practiced for months, no one showed up. My teacher, Mrs. Wilson, sat in the front row clapping enthusiastically, but the 4 empty seats beside her felt like gaping wounds. Mom later explained they had an emergency with Amber's dance costume for her recital the following week. Even my college graduation felt hollow. I graduated with honors from Cornell with a business degree, hoping that finally I would make my father proud. They arrived 45 minutes late to the ceremony, stayed for half an hour of photos, where Dad checked his watch repeatedly, then left early because Ryan has a baseball tournament tomorrow. I stood watching their car disappear, my diploma case clutched in hand, feeling like an outsider in my own family story. By the time I reached adulthood, our family dynamic was firmly established. Dad, the successful businessman who built an empire from a small family company, was the unquestioned authority. Mom orbited around him, managing the household and social calendar with precision, but never challenging his decisions. Amber, my sister, who was 4 years younger, had mastered the art of manipulation, always knowing exactly what to say to get her way with our parents. She received a luxury car for her 16th birthday, while I had saved for 2 years to buy a used sedan at the same age. Ryan, the youngest at 25, was the golden child. He followed our father into the family business straight out of college, skipping entry-level positions to become a special projects director, a title created just for him. While I had wanted to join the company too, Dad suggested I gain experience elsewhere first. 5 years of experience later, he still thought I wasn't ready. Our family gatherings were performances of perfection rather than genuine connections. Mom would orchestrate elaborate dinners, where everyone played their assigned roles. Dad, the successful patriarch, Mom, the supportive wife Amber, the charming daughter Ryan, the promising heir. I was cast as the responsible oldest son, who somehow never quite fit the script. Diamond is doing well at his job, Mom would offer during these dinners, a generic statement that required no actual knowledge of my life or accomplishments. Is he finally making six figures? Yet Dad would ask not to me but about me, as if I wasn't sitting at the same table. These dynamics weren't subtle, but I kept trying. Each birthday, each holiday, each family occasion, I would show up with hope that somehow this time would be different. This time I would be seen as an equal member of the family. This time I would belong. But year after year, my hope dimmed a little more. Phone calls went unreturned. Invitations to my apartment for dinner were declined with thin excuses. Updates about my promotions or achievements were met with distracted congratulations before the conversation quickly turned to Ryan's latest success or Amber's new boyfriend. I became the family ghost present in photographs, but somehow unseen. And still I held on to the belief that blood meant something. That somewhere beneath all the disappointment and distance, there was love. I was 30 years old, still trying to earn my place at the family table. Little did I know that my 30th birthday would be the day I finally stopped trying. I woke up on July 12th with that peculiar feeling that accompanies milestone birthdays, a mix of reflection, anticipation, and the strange sensation of time passing too quickly. 30 years old, 3 decades of life. It seemed significant, a threshold crossing from youth into established adulthood. The morning sun filtered through my apartment blinds as I reached for my phone, expecting at least a text message from Mom. She usually remembered birthdays even if her messages were generic. But the notification screen was empty of family contacts. There were birthday wishes from my colleague John and my best friend Michael, but nothing from Gerald, Elizabeth, Amber, or Ryan. Maybe they're planning something, I told myself, the hopeful part of me still alive, despite years of evidence to the contrary. After all, 30 was special. Maybe they wanted to surprise me. I made coffee and got ready for work, checking my phone every few minutes. By 8:30, when I needed to leave for the office, there was still nothing. I decided to be proactive and called Dad first. The call went straight to voicemail. Mom's phone rang 4 times before also going to voicemail. Same with Amber and Ryan. That's strange, I muttered to myself, staring at the phone. They were rarely all unavailable at the same time. A tiny knot of anxiety formed in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe they were arranging a surprise dinner and avoiding me until everything was ready. That must be it. Work provided a welcome distraction. My team had decorated my desk with balloons, and a small cake sat in the break room with Happy 30th Diamond written in blue frosting. John had organized a card that everyone signed, and my boss even stopped by to wish me well. The normalcy of the office celebrations made the silence from my family even more conspicuous. During lunch, I tried calling them again. Still no answer from anyone. The knot in my stomach tightened. Were they okay? Had something happened? I sent a group text, "Hey everyone, just checking in." All okay. No response. By the time I left work at 5, concern had shifted to hurt. Not even a text message on my 30th birthday seemed deliberately hurtful. I stopped by Michael's apartment on my way home, and he offered me a beer and sympathy. "Your family has always been weird about birthdays," he reminded me. "Remember when they scheduled that cruise during your 25th? I nodded, remembering how they had planned a family vacation that happened to fall during the week of my 25th birthday. I had been invited, but couldn't get the time off work on such short notice. They went without me. "Maybe check social media," Michael suggested. "See if they posted anything that might explain where they are." It seemed like a reasonable suggestion. I pulled out my phone and opened Facebook, something I rarely did these days. I navigated to Amber's profile since she posted the most frequently. And there it was. The post had been made 3 hours earlier. A photo of my entire family, Dad, Mom, Amber, and Ryan, standing on a pristine white beach blue ocean, behind them tropical drinks in hand. They were all smiling broadly, wearing new clothes I had never seen before. The location tag read, "Four Seasons Resort, Bora Bora, Tahiti." But it was the caption that turned my blood to ice. "A wonderful day for a wonderful family." Paradise found 62 likes, 17 comments, congratulating them on their beautiful vacation, and not a single mention of me or my birthday. I stared at the photo so long that Michael became concerned. Diamond. What is it? My hands trembled as I passed him the phone. He looked at the screen and swore under his breath. They went to Tahiti. All of them, without telling you. On your birthday. I couldn't speak. The betrayal was so complete, so deliberate, that it defied words. This wasn't a forgotten birthday or a scheduling oversight. This was a family vacation planned specifically during my 30th birthday, a milestone they had collectively decided to celebrate without me. With a numb feeling spreading through my body, I took back the phone and typed a simple comment under the photo, "Why?" I didn't expect an immediate response. I thought perhaps they would see it later, feel a flicker of shame, and at least offer some explanation. But within minutes, a notification appeared. Dad had replied to my comment. We didn't want to waste our time on a clown. Michael read the response over my shoulder and inhaled sharply. What the hell, Diamond, that's? I couldn't hear whatever he said next. There was a rushing sound in my ears, like ocean waves, ironically similar to what my family was probably hearing on their Tahitian beach. 30 years of disappointment, rejection, and subtle cruelty crystallized in that one sentence. I was the family clown, the joke, the one not worth their time. Something inside me shifted in that moment. A lifetime of seeking approval vanished, replaced by a clarity I had never experienced before. I felt my lips curve into a smile that held no warmth. With steady fingers, I typed my response. Surprise waiting for you. Then I put down my phone, thanked Michael for the beer, and walked home in the summer twilight. My mind was surprisingly quiet, empty of the hurt and anger I expected to feel. Instead, there was only determination and a strange sense of freedom. In my apartment, I sat at my desk and looked at the framed family photo from Christmas 2 years ago. We all wore matching sweaters and fake smiles. I had been so proud to be included in that photo, standing slightly apart, but still within the frame. How pathetic I had been. How desperate for scraps of affection. That night, as the rest of the city celebrated and fireworks occasionally lit up the sky for July 4th weekend, stragglers, I made a decision. I would no longer chase the approval of people who saw me as a clown. Instead, I would show them exactly who I was, someone they should have taken seriously all along. If they wanted to exclude me from the family, I would show them just what that truly meant. All of it. I slept better that night than I had in years. The morning after my birthday revelation, I woke with unusual clarity and purpose. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't wondering how to earn my family's approval or questioning what I had done wrong. Instead, my mind was focused on a single question. What did I have that they wanted? The answer came from an unexpected source, a memory of my grandfather's funeral 8 years earlier. Grandpa Joseph had been the founder of our family business, Diamond Solutions Incorporated. Yes, the company shared my name. Though Dad always emphasized it was named after the gem, not me. During the reading of the will, there had been some tension I didn't understand at the time. Dad had seemed both relieved and anxious about certain provisions, but when I asked questions, he dismissed them as boring legal matters. I made an appointment with Charles Whitman, a respected estate attorney, who had no connection to my family. His office was in a converted brownstone downtown, with leather chairs and bookshelves that spoke of old money and discretion. I need to understand my grandfather's will, I explained after the pleasantries, specifically any provisions that might take effect when a grandchild turns 30. Charles nodded thoughtfully. This isn't uncommon. Many trusts have age provisions. I'll need your grandfather's full name and date of death to request the public record. 2 days and $400 later, I was back in his office, watching him scan through the documents. Here it is, he said, pointing to a paragraph halfway down the page. Joseph Diamond established a family trust with explicit instructions that his grandchildren would receive equal shares of 25% of company stock upon reaching 30 years of age. He looked up at me. When exactly did you turn 30? 2 days ago, I replied, my mind racing. And my father never mentioned this to me. Charles frowned. The executor is required to notify beneficiaries. Who was the executor? My father. His frown deepened. That's a serious breach of fiduciary duty. You should have been notified, at least by your 30th birthday. The pieces were falling into place now. My family hadn't just forgotten my birthday, they had deliberately removed themselves from the country when I might ask questions about my inheritance. Dad's comment about not wasting time on a clown took on new meaning. He thought I was too stupid to remember the will or assert my rights. What does 25% of the company's stock mean in terms of control? I asked. Charles explained that with 25%, I would be the single largest individual shareholder. While not enough for outright control, it was enough to have significant influence on major decisions, especially if I could convince other shareholders to side with me. Have you ever signed any documents related to the family business or your inheritance? Charles asked. I shook my head. They kept me at arm's length from the company. Dad always said I should gain experience elsewhere first. A small smile played at the corners of Charles's mouth. That might have been a strategic error on his part. I left the attorney's office with a clear first step, but knew I needed more information about the current state of the company. Through a former colleague who worked in financial services, I got an introduction to Sandra Martinez, a sharp-eyed financial analyst who specialized in private company valuations. Diamond Solutions has been doing some interesting maneuvers lately, Sandra told me, after reviewing the public records. There's been a lot of restructuring subsidiaries being created and dissolved. The kind of thing you see when someone's either preparing to sell or trying to hide assets. Could my father be trying to dilute the company value before my inheritance kicks in? I asked. It's possible, she said, tapping her pen against her notepad. But I'd need to see internal documents to know for sure. The next piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. At a networking event the following evening, I overheard someone mention Marcus Reeves, my father's former business partner, who had been bought out under mysterious circumstances a decade earlier. I introduced myself, carefully avoiding my last name, and we struck up a conversation. After we had built some rapport, I revealed who I was. His expression changed immediately. Gerald Diamond's son, I'm surprised you'd want to talk to me. Your father made it very clear what he thought of me when he forced me out. I'm not my father, I said simply, and I think I might be his next target. Over drinks, Marcus told me the real story of how Dad had manipulated company finances to make it appear that Marcus was underperforming, then used that as leverage to buy him out at a fraction of his shares worth. Your father is brilliant at making everything look legitimate on paper, Marcus warned, but he plays dirty, always has. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what happened to you? I asked. Marcus studied me for a long moment. If it came to legal action, yes. Your father cost me millions and my reputation. But be careful, he won't take this lying down. Over the next week, I methodically built my case. Charles helped me draft the legal documents, asserting my inheritance rights. Sandra identified potential financial irregularities we could investigate with proper access. And Marcus connected me with 3 other former executives who had similar stories of my father's underhanded tactics. But the technical aspects were the easy part. The emotional weight of what I was about to do hit me during a quiet dinner with my best friend Michael. Are you sure about this? He asked after I explained my plan. This will change your relationship with your family forever. I pushed my food around my plate. What relationship? They went to Tahiti without me on my 30th birthday and called me a clown. I think they've made their feelings clear. Still, this is major. Taking on your dad's company, potentially exposing family secrets. There's no going back from that. He was right, and I knew it. Despite everything, some childish part of me still hoped for reconciliation, for my father to finally see my worth, for my mother to stand up for me just once, for my siblings to treat me like a brother rather than an inconvenience. I know I finally said, but I've spent 30 years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I'm done. If they can't respect me as a son and brother, maybe they'll respect me as an adversary. The next day I visited Mrs. Wilson, my old piano teacher who had sat alone at my recital all those years ago. Now in her 70s, she still taught occasionally and had always shown me more genuine support than my own family. You were always so talented, she said, serving tea in her small living room crowded with music books, but so eager to please. I worried about that. I'm not trying to please them anymore, I told her. She patted my hand. Good. Sometimes family is just people you're related to, It doesn't mean you have to accept mistreatment. Her validation helped quiet the doubts still whispering in my mind. This wasn't about revenge, I told myself. This was about justice and self-respect, about finally standing up and refusing to be the family clown any longer. By the end of that week, while my family was still posting sunset photos from their Tahitian paradise, my plan was ready. Charles had prepared the legal documents. Sandra had identified key financial records we would need to access. Marcus and the other former executives had provided sworn statements about my father's business practices. All that remained was to implement the plan, and for that timing would be everything. According to Amber's enthusiastic social media updates, they would be returning in 1 week. I would be ready. On Monday morning, exactly 10 days after my birthday, I walked into the offices of Blackwell & Schmidt, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. I had spent the weekend finalizing my strategy with Charles, who had referred me to Patricia Blackwell herself, a corporate attorney with a reputation for taking on family business disputes and winning. Your case is straightforward, legally, but complex emotionally, Patricia said after reviewing the documents. Your grandfather's will is clear. You are entitled to 25% of Diamond Solutions as of your 30th birthday. The fact that your father, as executor, failed to transfer those shares to you creates a serious legal problem for him. We spent 3 hours outlining our approach. By noon, Patricia's associates were drafting formal notices to the company, the board of directors, and my father personally. By 3 o'clock, the documents were being delivered by courier. Simultaneously, I had Sandra submit formal shareholder information requests based on my inheritance rights. While we expected these to be initially denied, the requests created a paper trail showing we had attempted proper channels before taking more aggressive action. The key is to move quickly, on multiple fronts, Patricia advised. Your father will try to create delays while he maneuvers. We need to keep the pressure consistent. The first response came within hours. Not from my father, but from the company's general counsel, Howard Barnes. Mr. Diamond, he said, his voice tight, with barely controlled tension. I understand you've made certain claims regarding company ownership. I'm sure we can clear up this misunderstanding without involving outside attorneys. I'm simply claiming my legal inheritance, I replied calmly. An inheritance I should have been informed about by my father, who had a fiduciary duty to notify me as the executor of my grandfather's estate. Silence stretched over the phone line before Howard spoke again. I'll need to consult with the CEO on this matter. Of course, my attorneys will expect a response by tomorrow at 5. I hung up feeling a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. For years I had been the family member who acquiesced, who accepted whatever scraps of attention were thrown my way. Now I was dictating terms. The next morning, the second phase of our plan began. Based on information from Marcus and public company filings, we identified 3 banks holding company accounts that might contain evidence of financial irregularities. With Patricia's guidance, I submitted formal requests to freeze transactions related to specific subsidiary companies, pending ownership clarification. By noon, my phone was ringing constantly. Howard called 3 times, each conversation more strained than the last. 2 board members I had never met called to understand my concerns. I maintained the same calm, professional tone, with each referring them to Patricia for legal matters, while making it clear that I was simply claiming my rightful place in the company my grandfather had built. The real shock came at 4:30, when my father called from Tahiti. I had been wondering when he would break his silence. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, skipping any greeting. Claiming my inheritance, I replied, my heart pounding, despite my outward calm. The 25% of the company that Grandpa Joseph left to each grandchild upon turning 30. The shares you were supposed to transfer to me as executor of his will. His momentary silence told me everything. He had hoped, assumed, that I never knew about this provision. "This is a complex legal matter that you clearly don't understand," he finally said, his voice shifting to the condescending tone he had used throughout my childhood. "We can discuss this when we return from our trip." Actually, we can't. My attorneys have already filed the necessary paperwork. The company accounts associated with Trans-Pacific Holdings and Eastern Shore Ventures have been temporarily frozen pending ownership clarification. Those were the two subsidiaries Sandra had identified as most likely being used for questionable financial maneuvers. My father's sharp intake of breath confirmed we had hit a nerve. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said, his voice now dangerous and low. "You're going to destroy this family." That's interesting, coming from someone who called me a clown and took the entire family to Tahiti on my 30th birthday without me. Another silence then. That was Amber's idea. She wanted a special graduation trip. The excuse was so transparent, so obviously false, that I actually laughed. "Amber graduated 2 years ago. You can do better than that, Dad." "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice now deadly serious. "If you continue down this path, there will be consequences you cannot imagine. Some things are better left alone." "I'm not alone anymore," I replied. "I have excellent attorneys, financial analysts, and statements from your former business partners about your methods. You should talk to Marcus Reeves when you get back." We had a fascinating conversation. The line went dead. He had hung up on me. Within an hour, my phone exploded with texts and calls from Amber and my mother. Amber's messages were pure rage. "How dare you ruin our vacation? Dad is furious. What is wrong with you?" Mom's approach was more emotional. "Diamond, please. Whatever this is about, can't it wait until we're home? Your father is so upset. Please stop this for the family." I didn't respond to either of them. Years of being ignored had taught me the power of silence. Ryan was the only one who took a different approach. His single text read, "I don't know what's happening, but can we talk when I get back? Just you and me." I responded to him alone. "Yes, but things are in motion now." The next day brought escalation from both sides. My father had clearly made calls from Tahiti, because the company's outside counsel, a much more senior and aggressive attorney than Howard, contacted Patricia, demanding immediate withdrawal of all claims. Meanwhile, Patricia's team filed additional documents revealing the previously undisclosed subsidiaries and requesting court supervision of any transactions involving them. We also submitted a formal complaint to the State Bar Association regarding my father's breach of fiduciary duty as executor. By Thursday, 2 days before my family's scheduled return, news of the conflict had reached the business press. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal called asking for comment on the Diamond family business dispute. I declined to speak on the record, but the story ran anyway, citing anonymous sources familiar with the situation. The article was carefully worded, but devastating in its implications, noting that Diamond Solutions was facing questions about subsidiary operations and ownership disputes following inheritance claims from the founder's grandson. That evening, I received another call from my father. This time, he attempted a different approach. "Diamond," he said, his voice artificially warm. "I think we've had a serious misunderstanding. I always intended to transfer your shares upon our return. This trip was planned months ago, before I realized the timing would conflict with your birthday. Is that why you called me a clown? When I asked why you were all in Tahiti without me?" He paused. "I was upset that you were making a scene on Amber's social media. That was inappropriate. More inappropriate than taking the entire family to a tropical paradise on your oldest son's 30th birthday, without even sending a text message. You're blowing this out of proportion," he insisted. "Let's discuss this like adults when we return. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone." "I look forward to that discussion," I said, then added, "By the way, did you know that Grandpa Joseph's will has been public record all this time? Anyone could have requested a copy." I ended the call before he could respond. The final piece of my strategy unfolded the next day. With the guidance of Sandra and Patricia, I began approaching minority shareholders, mostly family friends and early investors in my grandfather's company. I explained the situation, shared the documentation of my inheritance rights, and suggested that greater transparency in company operations would benefit all shareholders. By Friday evening, I had secured supportive statements from shareholders representing another 15% of the company. Combined with my 25%, we would have enough influence to demand a special board meeting and full financial disclosure. As I prepared for my family's return the next day, I felt oddly calm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anxiously seeking their approval or preparing to be disappointed. I was standing my ground, claiming what was rightfully mine. The clown had left the circus, and the real show was about to begin. The morning my family was scheduled to return from Tahiti dawned bright and clear, a perfect summer day that belied the storm about to break. I had slept remarkably well, considering what lay ahead, and woke feeling prepared for the confrontation. Patricia had advised me to meet my family on neutral ground, rather than at their home or my apartment. "You want a setting where they can't control the narrative," she explained. "Somewhere public enough that they'll be conscious of appearances, but private enough for a real conversation." I reserved a private dining room at Belvedere, an upscale restaurant downtown, that my family favored for business meetings. The manager, recognizing the Diamond name, was happy to accommodate my request for privacy and discretion. At 4 o'clock, I received a text from Ryan Landed. "Dad wants everyone at the house at 7. Emergency family meeting." I replied simply, "Belvedere private dining room at 7. My terms, or we can continue through attorneys only." There was a long pause before Ryan responded, "I'll tell them." I arrived at 6:30, dressed in a tailored suit that projected confidence and professionalism. The restaurant staff led me to the private room where a round table had been set with 5 places. I had deliberately chosen a round table no-head seat for my father to occupy as a position of authority. At 6:55, they arrived together. Dad led the way, his tan contrasting sharply with the thunderous expression on his face. Mom followed, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Amber strode in, with deliberate confidence that couldn't quite mask her anxiety. Ryan entered last, his expression unreadable. "What is the meaning of this circus?" Dad demanded, as the door closed behind them. I gestured to the table. "Please sit down. I've ordered appetizers. You must be hungry after your long flight." "We're not here for dinner," Amber snapped. "We're here because you've lost your mind and are trying to destroy our family." "Interesting perspective," I replied calmly. "Please sit down." Something in my tone, perhaps the complete absence of the conciliatory attitude they expected, caused them to comply. Dad took the seat directly across from me, Mom and Amber flanking him. Ryan hesitated, then sat at equal distance between me and our parents. "Diamond, honey," Mom began in her soothing voice, the one she used when trying to smooth over conflicts. "We don't understand what this is all about. If you were upset about the trip—" "This isn't about the trip," I interrupted gently. "Though I admit discovering your entire family went to Tahiti on your 30th birthday without so much as a text message does clarify where you stand." "You're making a mountain out of a molehill," Dad said dismissively. "We had this trip planned for months." "Did you also plan to call me a clown on social media? Was that part of the itinerary?" Dad's jaw tightened. "You were being childish, commenting on Amber's vacation photos with your passive-aggressive questions." "Asking why is passive-aggressive now." "Interesting." I opened the leather portfolio I had brought and removed a document. "But as I said, this isn't about the trip. This is about my inheritance." I slid the document across the table, a copy of Grandfather Joseph's will with the relevant section highlighted. "I turned 30 last week. According to Grandpa's will, I am now entitled to 25% of Diamond Solutions. As executor of his estate, Dad, you were legally obligated to transfer those shares to me. You failed to do so, which constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty." Dad didn't look at the document. "There are complications you don't understand. The company structure has changed since your grandfather's time. His intentions need to be interpreted in the context of current operations." "Is that why you created Trans-Pacific Holdings and Eastern Shore Ventures? To interpret Grandpa's intentions?" The color drained from his face. "What are those?" Mom asked, looking confused. "Shell companies," I explained, "where Dad has been moving assets to dilute the value of the main company stock. Essentially, he's been siphoning value from Diamond Solutions into entities he controls exclusively to reduce what Ryan and I would inherit." Ryan's head snapped up. "What?" Dad pounded his fist on the table. "That's absurd. I've been protecting the company's interests through strategic restructuring." "Is that what you told Marcus Reeves when you forced him out? That you were protecting the company's interests?" "Marcus Reeves was incompetent," Dad snarled. "He nearly drove us into bankruptcy." That's not what the financial records show, I replied. And it's not what he and 3 other former executives have stated in sworn affidavits. Amber, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly erupted. This is insane. You're going to destroy everything Dad built because you're jealous. You've always been jealous of Ryan and me. I turned to her, maintaining my calm. Jealous? Of what? The fact that you've never held a real job, that Dad funds your apartment, your car, your vacations, while telling me I need to earn my own way. I work for the company, she shouted. You have a title and an office you visit twice a month, I corrected her. And speaking of jealousy, do you want to tell me about the times you deliberately sabotaged my relationships? Like when you told Melissa I was seeing someone else when we were in college? Or when you convinced Dad not to invest in my startup idea, while he funded your failed boutique? Her mouth opened and closed without words. Mom began to cry softly. Diamond, please, we're family. Whatever mistakes we've made, whatever you think we've done wrong, we can fix this together. That's what I'm trying to do, I said, softening my tone slightly. Fix things. Create boundaries that work for all of us. But that starts with honesty and respect, neither of which has been extended to me. You want respect. Dad's voice was dangerous now. You go behind my back, freeze company accounts, talk to my competitors and former partners, and you want respect. You have no idea what I've sacrificed to build this company to provide for this family. You're right, I don't, I acknowledged. Because you never involved me in the company. You kept me at arm's length my entire life, personally and professionally. But Grandpa Joseph wanted all his grandchildren to have a stake in the company. He put that in writing, and it's legally binding. What do you want? Ryan asked, quietly speaking for the first time. Really, what's the endgame here? It was a good question. What did I want? Revenge, power, money. None of those seemed quite right. I want what should have been freely given, I said finally. Recognition as a legitimate member of this family. Acknowledgement of my right to be part of the company our grandfather built. And yes, my legal inheritance. You'll destroy everything Dad said, but his tone had shifted from anger to something closer to desperation. Some of these arrangements you're questioning, they're complicated. If they're exposed to regulatory scrutiny... Are you saying you've done something illegal? I asked bluntly. No, he protested too quickly. Just creative accounting that might be misinterpreted. The waiter chose that moment to arrive with appetizers, forcing a temporary pause in the conversation. As he arranged the plates and left, the tension in the room was palpable. Here's my proposal, I said, once we were alone again. I will take my rightful 25% ownership. I will join the board of directors. All subsidiary companies will be fully disclosed and properly integrated into the corporate structure. And there will be a complete audit of company finances by an independent firm. Absolutely not, Dad responded immediately. Then we continue through the courts, I said with a shrug. The temporary freeze on those specific accounts becomes permanent pending legal resolution. The statements from Marcus and others become public record. The audit happens anyway, but with regulatory oversight. Dad's face had grown increasingly pale. Mom was openly sobbing now. Amber looked like she might explode with rage at any moment. You would do this to your own family? Dad asked incredulously. After everything we've done for you? The question hung in the air, so absurd that I almost laughed. What exactly have you done for me, Dad? Forgotten my birthdays? Dismissed my achievements? Called me a clown on social media? We're family, Amber screamed, drawing concerned looks from a waiter passing by the partially open door. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me, I replied steadily. Family doesn't exclude one member from vacations. Family doesn't lie about inheritances. Please, Mom whispered, reaching across the table toward me. Please, Diamond, we can work this out. We're your family. I looked at her tear-stained face and felt a twinge of sympathy. She had always been caught in the middle, too afraid of my father to stand up for me, too dependent on him to risk his displeasure. Yes, you are, I agreed, which is why I'm giving you this chance to make things right privately rather than having it all play out in public view. Dad stared at me for a long moment, his expression shifting from anger to calculation to something I'd never seen before. Respect, however reluctant. "I need time to consider the implications," he said finally. "You have until noon tomorrow," I replied. "After that, my attorneys proceed with the court filings." Amber stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. "This is insane. Dad, you can't seriously be considering giving in to this blackmail." "It's not blackmail," Amber, Ryan said quietly. "If what Diamond is saying is true about our inheritance and these shell companies, he's just claiming what's legally his." "Of course you take his side," she snapped. "I'm not taking sides," Ryan protested. "I'm trying to understand what's happening." As their argument escalated, Dad suddenly clutched at his chest, his face contorting in pain. Mom screamed his name as he slumped forward in his chair. The next few minutes were chaos. I called emergency services while Ryan helped Dad to the floor. Mom knelt beside him, sobbing his name over and over. Amber stood frozen in shock, her anger forgotten in the face of crisis. The paramedics arrived within minutes, quickly assessing that Dad was having a mild heart attack. As they prepared to transport him to the hospital, he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "We're family," he gasped, his eyes boring into mine. "Please." I watched as they wheeled him out, a complex storm of emotions swirling within me. I had wanted acknowledgement, respect, a place at the table, not this, never this. "Are you happy now?" Amber hissed as she followed the stretcher. I had no answer for her. In truth, I didn't know what I felt anymore. The emergency room waiting area at Metropolitan Hospital was a study in isolation. Despite sitting just feet apart, our family might as well have been on different planets. Mom stared blankly at the institutional beige wall, her hands mechanically turning her wedding ring in endless circles. Amber paced near the vending machines, occasionally shooting accusatory glances in my direction. Ryan sat beside me, maintaining a neutral buffer zone between warring factions. After 2 hours, a doctor emerged with news. Dad had indeed suffered a heart attack, but a relatively minor one. He was stable, would need to make some lifestyle changes, and would be kept overnight for observation. "One family member can see him now briefly," the doctor advised. Without discussion, Mom stood and followed him through the double doors. The silent hierarchy of our family remained intact, even in crisis. Once Mom was gone, Amber rounded on me. "This is your fault," she said, her voice low but intense. "If he had died tonight, it would have been because of you." I met her gaze steadily. His heart attack was caused by decades of stress, poor diet, and his own choices, not by me asking for what's legally mine. "You have no idea what you've done," she continued, ignoring my response. "Do you know what happens to the company if Dad's reputation is damaged? What happens to our lifestyle? My apartment? My future? Maybe you should have thought about that before treating me like I didn't matter for 30 years. Ryan cleared his throat. "Both of you stop. This isn't helping anything." "Stay out of this," Ryan, Amber snapped. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it concerns all of us," he replied, with unexpected firmness. "If what Diamond is saying is true about Grandpa's will, this affects my inheritance too, and yours." That stopped her momentarily. "What are you talking about?" "The will apparently states that all grandchildren get 25% of the company at age 30, Ryan explained. "That means you get your share in 2 years. I get mine in 5. Amber turned to me. "Is that true?" I nodded. "You can read the will yourself. It's public record." She sat down heavily, her righteous anger deflating somewhat as she processed this new information. "So Dad was hiding this from all of us. Not just you." "It appears that way," I confirmed, though I'm sure he would have explained it as waiting for the right time, or protecting the company structure. The three of us fell into uneasy silence. The bright fluorescent lights and occasional hospital announcements the only interruption to our thoughts. After about 20 minutes, Mom returned, her eyes red-rimmed but her composure restored. "He's asking to see you," she said, looking directly at me. Me. I couldn't hide my surprise. She nodded. "Just you." I followed the nurse to Dad's room, unsure what to expect. The sight of my father, the man who had always seemed larger than life, connected to monitors, and looking suddenly old and vulnerable, was jarring. "Sit down." he said, his voice raspy, but still commanding. I took the chair beside his bed, maintaining a careful emotional distance. You've put me in an impossible position, he began, without preamble. I could say the same to you, I replied. He waved his hand dismissively, then winced, as the movement pulled at his IV. The company is more complex than you understand. There are arrangements, partnerships, obligations that go back decades. Illegal arrangements. Not illegal, he insisted. Creative. Necessary. The business world isn't black and white. And hiding my inheritance? Was that creative too? He sighed a long exhale that seemed to deflate him further. I was going to tell you. Eventually. When you were ready. I've been ready. For years. You just didn't want to share control. He didn't deny it, which was perhaps the most honest he'd ever been with me. What happens now? He asked, after a long pause. That depends on you, I said. My terms haven't changed. He closed his eyes briefly. And if I agree to your terms, what guarantees do I have that you won't go public with other information? I'm not interested in destroying the company, Dad, or the family. I just want what's mine, and I want honest operations going forward. Another long silence stretched between us before he finally spoke again. I'll need to talk to the lawyers. Make arrangements. It will take time. I understand. But no more delays or excuses. I need to see concrete progress. He nodded almost imperceptibly. Your grandfather would have approved of this, you know. He valued backbone. Said I was too controlling sometimes. The admission, however, small, felt momentous. I stood to leave oddly unsettled by this new version of my father, vulnerable, acquiescent, almost human. Diamond, he called, as I reached the door. The family trip. It wasn't just about avoiding your birthday or the inheritance. Amber really did want a special graduation trip. 2 years after her graduation. She's been talking about it since she graduated. We finally had the time. The timing with your birthday was unfortunate. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was the most explanation he had ever offered for excluding me. And the clown comment, I asked. He had the decency to look ashamed. I was angry, out of line. Again, not an apology, but an admission of fault. From my father, that was unprecedented. I nodded once, and left unsure how to process this slight shift in our relationship dynamics. The next week was a blur of meetings, legal consultations, and tentative steps toward restructuring both the company and our family relationships. Dad was released from the hospital the day after his heart attack prescribed rest and stress reduction, the latter seeming particularly ironic given the circumstances. The most surprising development came from my mother. 3 days after Dad's heart attack, she asked to meet me for lunch alone, something that had never happened in my adult life. We sat at a quiet corner table in a cafe near my apartment. I owe you an apology, she said, after our orders had been taken, the words clearly difficult for her. I should have protected you more, stood up for you. Why didn't you? I asked the question I'd wanted to ask for decades. She twisted her napkin in her hands. Fear mostly. Your father can be overwhelming. When we married, I was young, impressionable. By the time I realized the dynamic we had created, it seemed too late to change it. She looked up at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time. That's not an excuse. Just the truth. I failed you as a mother. The admission hit me harder than I expected. I had long ago stopped hoping for acknowledgement from either parent. I've joined a support group, she continued, when I didn't immediately respond. For women in controlling relationships, I should have done it years ago. Better late than never, I offered, surprised by my own willingness to extend an olive branch. Meanwhile, the company underwent the beginning stages of transformation. With my attorneys present, Dad signed the documents officially transferring 25% ownership to me. An independent auditor was engaged to review the complete financial structure, including the subsidiary companies I had identified. Amber's reaction to these changes was the most dramatic. After her initial fury subsided, she fell into a state of panic as she realized her lifestyle might be affected by the company restructuring. What am I supposed to do if my allowance is cut? She demanded. During a tense family dinner a week after Dad's heart attack. I have rent, car payments, credit card bills. Get a job, I suggested. Like most adults. Doing what I have a degree in art history. Then use it. Museums hire people with art history degrees, or go back to school for something else. Or start at entry level somewhere and work your way up. She stared at me as if I'd suggested she'd try living on Mars. That's easy for you to say. You've always been independent. Because I had to be, I reminded her. Because no one was handing me an allowance or paying my rent. The conversation might have devolved into another argument, but Ryan intervened with surprising authority. Amber Diamond is right. We've been sheltered too long. I've been thinking about this since everything happened. I don't even know if I want to work for the family company anymore. Dad, who had been unusually quiet through dinner, looked up sharply. What are you talking about? You're being groomed to take over eventually. That was your plan, not mine, Ryan said quietly. I've never really had the chance to figure out what I want. It was as if a dam had broken. Years of unspoken truths and suppressed feelings came pouring out. Mom admitted she had always hated the pressure of social expectations that came with being a diamond wife. Amber confessed she had sabotaged several of my relationships out of jealousy over my independence. Ryan revealed he had wanted to study environmental science, not business. And through it all, Dad sat in stunned silence, watching as the carefully controlled family narrative he had constructed crumbled before his eyes. 2 weeks after my birthday, the day that had sparked this entire chain of events, we gathered at Dr. Thompson's office for our first official family therapy session. It had been my suggestion, surprisingly supported by Mom, and eventually reluctantly agreed to by Dad. I want to establish some ground rules, Dr. Thompson began. This is a space for honest communication without judgment. Everyone will have a chance to speak and be heard. We're not here to assign blame, but to understand each other better and establish healthier patterns moving forward. For 2 hours, we barely scratched the surface of 30 years of dysfunction. Dad struggled to articulate his feelings, relying instead on practical concerns about the company. Mom spoke more freely than I had ever heard, revealing how isolated she had felt even while surrounded by family. Amber oscillated between defensive anger and glimpses of genuine remorse. Ryan, the peacemaker, tried to see all sides, while tentatively expressing his own needs for the first time. And I spoke my truth without anger or blame, but with the clarity that had come from finally standing up for myself. I don't know if we can ever be the kind of family that I wanted as a child, I admitted toward the end of the session. Too much has happened, too many years lost. But maybe we can create something new. Something based on honesty and respect, rather than control and performance. As we left the therapist's office walking together toward the parking lot in the golden afternoon light, there was a tentative sense of possibility. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take much longer, if it ever came, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The company would survive though changed. The family would continue though transformed. And I would move forward, no longer defined by my desperate search for approval, but by my own strength and self-worth. For 30 years, I had been searching for my place within my family. Now I realized that my place was one I created for myself, not as the forgotten son or the family clown, but as a man who had finally found his voice and the courage to use it. 6 months after what we now refer to as the Tahiti incident, I sat alone on my balcony, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The evening air carried the first hints of autumn, a gentle reminder that seasons change, life moves forward, and nothing, not even pain, lasts forever. The immediate aftermath of my family confrontation had been difficult. There were days when I questioned my decisions, nights when old insecurities whispered that I had destroyed whatever chance I had at family connection. The weight of 30 years of seeking approval doesn't disappear overnight, even when you intellectually understand that you've done the right thing. My weekly sessions with Dr. Patricia Collins, a therapist specializing in family trauma, became an anchor during those turbulent early months. She helped me recognize patterns I hadn't even been aware of, the way I overworked to prove my value, how I apologized for taking up space, my reluctance to express needs or boundaries. Healing isn't linear, she reminded me often. There will be good days and hard days. The goal isn't to erase the past, but to stop letting it control your future. My friendship with Michael proved invaluable during this time. He had seen me at my lowest points over the years and now celebrated each small victory in my journey towards self-worth. When I doubted myself, he was there with unwavering support and occasional necessary tough love. Your father called you a clown on social media and took your entire family to Tahiti on your 30th birthday, he would say whenever I wavered. You don't owe them your silence or your sacrifice. Mrs. Wilson, my former piano teacher, invited me to dinner, about 2 months after everything happened. At 72, she remained sharp and insightful. I always knew you had this strength in you, she told me, over homemade lasagna. Even as a boy when you played piano, there was this determination beneath the need to please. I'm proud of you for finding it. Coming from her, someone who had shown me more consistent support than my own parents, those words meant everything. Professionally, my life underwent significant changes as well. As a board member and major shareholder of Diamond Solutions, I now attended quarterly meetings and had input on major decisions. Dad, still CEO, but with diminished authority, treated me with a cautious respect that, while not warmth, was preferable to the dismissal I had known my entire life. The independent audit had revealed concerning but not catastrophic financial irregularities. With proper restructuring and transparency measures implemented, the company remained stable. The subsidiaries Dad had created were properly integrated into the corporate structure, with clear accounting and appropriate oversight. My relationships with individual family members evolved at different paces. Mom, perhaps surprisingly, made the most dramatic changes. After 32 years of marriage defined by acquiescence, she found her voice not only in therapy, but in life. She enrolled in community college classes, joined a book club, and even started volunteering at a women's shelter. Our weekly lunch dates became a time for getting to know each other as adults, rather than as mother and son locked in old patterns. I should have done this decades ago, she confessed during one of these lunches. I let fear keep me small for so long. What changed? I asked. She considered the question carefully. Seeing you stand up for yourself made me realize I could do the same. If my son could face the consequences of challenging your father, surely I could too. Dad's transformation was less dramatic, but still significant. The heart attack had been a wake-up call physically, and the family upheaval had forced emotional reckonings he had avoided his entire life. He attended therapy reluctantly at first, then with growing engagement as he began to connect his own childhood experiences with his parenting approach. During a rare one-on-one lunch 3 months after everything happened, he made what for him was an extraordinary admission. My father, your grandfather, was a great businessman, but a demanding parent, he said, staring into his coffee. Nothing was ever good enough. I swore I'd be different, but somehow, he trailed off the irony, apparently striking him. You became what you knew I finished for him. He nodded, meeting my eyes briefly. I'm not good at this talking about feelings, admitting mistakes, but I'm trying to learn. It wasn't an explicit apology, but from my father it was revolutionary. Amber's journey was the rockiest. The sudden reduction in her allowance and the requirement that she find actual employment threw her into a crisis that alternated between rage, self-pity, and occasional moments of growth. After cycling through 3 jobs in 4 months, she finally found stability working at an art gallery, a position that actually utilized her art history degree and introduced her to a world beyond the privileged bubble she had inhabited. I'm dating someone new, she told me during a cautious coffee meeting. He's a teacher. Dad hates him. And what do you think of him? I asked. She seemed startled by the question, as if her own opinion had rarely been the point. I like him. He's kind, interested in my thoughts, not just how I look or who my family is. That sounds healthy. She nodded, then added hesitantly, I've been seeing someone too. A therapist, I mean. She's helping me understand why I was so awful to you growing up. Why were you? I asked, genuinely curious. Amber traced the rim of her coffee cup. Jealousy mostly. You always seemed so complete. Like you didn't need approval the way I did. I wanted to make you need it as desperately as I did. She looked up, her eyes showing genuine regret. I'm sorry, Diamond. For a lot of things. Ryan, always the most emotionally intelligent of us, made perhaps the most courageous move. 2 months after our confrontation, He resigned from Diamond Solutions to pursue a master's degree in environmental science, his long-deferred passion. Dad had been initially furious, then hurt, then finally reluctantly supportive. "I'm done living someone else's life," Ryan told me over beers. "Watching you stand up for yourself showed me I could do the same." "How does it feel?" I asked. His smile was answer enough. Terrifying, and absolutely right. Throughout all these changes, I continued my own parallel journey of healing and self-discovery. I resumed playing piano after a 15-year hiatus, finding joy in music without the pressure of parental approval. I started dating again more selectively, and with healthier boundaries. I even began volunteering as a mentor for young adults, aging out of foster care, using my experience to help others navigate family trauma and independence. As the 6-month mark approached, Dr. Thompson suggested a family dinner outside of the therapy, setting a real-world test of our progress. We gathered at a neutral restaurant, all 5 of us together, for the first time since Dad's heart attack. The conversation was occasionally stilted, old habits threatening to resurface. But there were also moments of genuine connection, shared laughter over a waiter's joke, to respectful attention, when each person spoke in absence of the cutting remarks that had once been our primary language. At the end of the meal, Dad cleared his throat. "I'd like to propose something," he said with uncharacteristic hesitancy. "A family trip. All of us. Maybe for Christmas." A beat of silence fell over the table, as we all processed the suggestion and its implications. "Where were you thinking?" Mom asked. "Somewhere none of us has been," before he replied. "New memories, fresh start." I met his gaze across the table. "I'd like that," I said simply. Walking home from that dinner, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my life. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, and likely never would be. We were all still learning, stumbling occasionally, falling back into old patterns. Real healing takes years, not months. But for the first time, I wasn't seeking a specific outcome from my family relationship. I wasn't desperately hoping for approval or inclusion. I had built my own foundation of self-worth that existed independently of their validation. Standing up for myself hadn't destroyed my family, as I had sometimes feared in those dark early days. Instead, it had created space for something potentially healthier to grow in the ashes of old dysfunctional patterns. Not the family I had yearned for as a child, but perhaps one that could offer genuine connection as adults. The most profound lesson I learned through this journey was that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to gain yourself. By finally saying no to disrespect and exclusion, by setting boundaries and demanding acknowledgement of my worth, I had created the possibility for authentic relationship with my family. Yes, but more importantly, with myself. True family isn't defined by shared DNA or last names. It's built on mutual respect, honesty, and the freedom to be fully yourself. Sometimes, that means walking away from toxic patterns. Sometimes it means standing your ground even when it's terrifying. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, it means finding your way back to each other as whole people rather than the roles you've been assigned. I don't know what the future holds for the Diamond family. I don't know if the fragile new connections we're building will strengthen or fracture under inevitable future pressures. But I do know that I will never again accept being treated as less than I am by my family or anyone else. That knowledge, that unshakable sense of my own worth, is the greatest inheritance I could have claimed. Have you ever had to stand up to your family to protect yourself? What was the most important lesson you learned from a family conflict? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply value yourself enough to say no more.